Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. As the economic climate continues to evolve, businesses are considering the strategies and tools that are needed to support an agile workforce, especially those that give flexibility to work from home or in the office without an impact on productivity or processes. We are excited to welcome Sean Morgan from SAP to Executive Leaders Network to talk about how automating your AP processes can help minimize disruption and enable your team to work anywhere, anytime. Throughout this talk, we will be taking questions, so please use the question tab on the right side of your screen to submit questions, and Sean will answer these at the end. All right, Sean, if you'd like to join me on screen. Hello.
Thank you, Robin.
No problem. Okay, I'm gonna leave this over to you.
Cool. Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for this webinar today. So my name is Sean. I'm a solutions consultant here at SAP Concur, and my role is to work with new businesses which are looking to explore our solutions and essentially evaluate the systems that they're using today to make sure they're working as optimally, as efficiently as they can as a finance team. So today, some of the key talking points that we're going to be looking through are, of course, the pros and cons of remote working, the challenges which finance teams are facing today with remote working as well. So, what we're hearing from our partners as well as our customer base on that front. We're going to be looking at what your AP process is currently costing you today and how you can start to make some steps towards calculating what that cost is as well. We're going to be looking at the benefits of an automated AP process, again, which is going to be backed up with some really interesting stats and insights, which we'll be sharing with you as well. And of course, the steps that you can take if you would like to, of course, look to automate your AP section. So before we go any further, I'd like to kick off with a couple of quick polls. So on the screen in front of you in just a moment, it should pop up with the poll to give your response as for where you're currently working, as for whether that is at home, whether that's in the office or on site, or whether that's a bit of a hybrid role at the moment of both. So give people a moment just to pop their answers in there. Cool. So it's obviously, as we probably all imagine, huge leaning towards those which are working predominantly at home. Currently shown 86% of people working at home, 6% working in the office or on site, and 4% working in hybrid roles. So that's really exactly what I expected, to be completely honest with you, and I think that's probably what we all thought we'd see. Now, in terms of the next slide that's going to pop up here, so we've got another poll, and this time this is really us starting to think about where we're likely to work in future, and appreciate, we don't necessarily have all the answers at the moment, but if you can, please let us know where you expect to work in future on the back of, what's happened recently in the modern workplace. Cool. So interestingly, it looks like it's about 70% of people expect to be working in a hybrid between home and office workplaces. Kind of a bit of a balance between those that are going to, expecting to be back in the office or fixed workplace, and the same with those working from home. It's really interesting what we are seeing at the moment, in terms of how businesses intend to essentially move forward, which is essentially what we're going to be talking about here today. So we're going to talk about some of the benefits and some of the challenges of remote working as well. So at the start of July, over 30% of the UK workplace were working from home or working remotely. And of course, as we've seen today in the survey, many of us still are. And you may have seen recently that tech giants Google and Facebook announced that their employees are going to continue to work indefinitely from home, or at least until the beginning of 2021. And hence why I guess we're seeing so many people on this webinar today. It's important for us to reflect on the pros and cons of this seismic shift in terms of how people are working. It's important for us to understand what the benefits are and what some of the drawbacks are, really when we start to think about this environment. So, of course, employee welfare is going to be top of the list. I can only speak for myself in terms of my commuting, but I've easily saved probably about 10 hours a week on commuting. That for me means that I can spend more time with my family, my friends. My family and friends are actually hung on the wall behind me. But it's really nice to be able to have that time back into my hands as an employee. What we've seen from speaking with HR leaders as well is that comparing this year against last year and previous years, it does seem that people are taking less sick days. There's compelling arguments on kind of both sides of why that can be. Is it because people have more time with their families? Is it because people feel that they have a better work-life balance, that they feel less need to sort of take that personal time, or how that translates to sick days can be difficult to understand, but it is an interesting trend. Lower costs, so office costs, obviously. Again, thinking about SAP Concur, we really do crunch the beans on coffee, so a huge saving for the facilities team there. But then we think about the kind of bill costs, the services, the upkeep, rental costs of buildings and everything. Now, as I mentioned, in my role, I speak with businesses that are looking at exploring our solutions, looking at gaining efficiency, visibility, or gaining more of a handle on risk and compliance. And one thing that I'm hearing more and more from those businesses at the moment is how they're going to move forward in a post-COVID world, and what their working life is going to look like. And many of these organizations are thinking of scaling back the number of offices they have. Many have paused plans that they had for new offices in different markets. And a couple of businesses I've spoken with, they're actually looking at completely removing their offices altogether, because they've been so impressed with what they've seen from productivity across their employees. And of course, it's still very early days, but hopefully it's interesting to kind of hear what we're hearing from the market as well, in terms of how businesses are planning to move forward. Productivity, so according to the Office of National Statistics, when surveyed, individuals that are working from home reported feeling approximately 13% more productive than at the workplace. That did come at some cost, with the average workday apparently being 43 minutes longer for most individuals that are working from home. So I think, whilst we are more productive, it's also important for companies and people teams within businesses to ensure that their people still are able to differentiate between what's the working time and what's kind of family, personal time, which is certainly part of that change. A positive thing on the back of COVID-19 is, of course, the adoption of technology. A recent McKinsey study said that with any future strategic plans for a business, if you're not including the idea of digitalizing manual processes, then you're already setting yourself up to fail. So on the back of this, we are seeing a lot more businesses open to technology, open to look at their technology stack and reinvesting in their workplace to ensure that if there is the chance of, say, for example, a second lockdown or local lockdowns like we're seeing here in the UK, their people are still able to carry out their roles to a high quality of work with the technology to support their organization. Now, this does come with its challenges, and of course, with challenges, with change, certainly comes challenges. And many people can be resistant to change. There's a lot of behavioral psychology behind why this is, why people can feel this way. And it's important for every organization to bear in mind that every person's situation, circumstances are going to be vastly different. So when I went into lockdown at the beginning of March, it's fairly straightforward. Working for a tech company, I tend to work remotely about 50% of the time anyway. So it wasn't too much of a disruption for me. But for those people that aren't used to that, they're used to the office culture, they're used to having that social aspect. And it could be that they live on their own at homes. They don't actually have that many people around them to have that human interaction with. It could be that they live with a spouse. Maybe they live in a house share and the house is really busy. And that sort of touches on the mental health aspects here as well. Absolutely, it's the elephant in the room at the moment, as much as everything else, which is really important to talk about. But, how are we caring for our employees? And how we how we look at their individual circumstances and situations as to ensure that we can keep those employees satisfied and happy and pleased to be working for our organization. Manual processes. So, of course, many of the processes that we see are simply not fit for remote working. We'll touch on the effects of those in the latter slides. But one thing I heard from a business recently, which were looking to process their supplier invoices. So typically, the invoices would be emailed in and printed out, or they'd be sent in as a paper format. They would then have to get the purchaser's approval on that invoice before sending it to the finance team, again then for reconciliation. Now, this organization actually had a courier that went into their office 3 times a week to go and pick up those invoices. And then that courier would have to do the rounds between a team of 10 people in finance. Thankfully, they all live fairly locally, to essentially distribute all of those invoices to those people. Then the courier would have to come back around, pick them up, to take them to the relevant processors that were then going to keep them in for finance and everything. So we are starting to see with this period how manual processes are starting to fall down. But, as much as we are talking about remote working a lot at the moment, I was interested as for how new this concept really was. And it turns out it's nothing which is particularly new. And in the past decade and the last 10 years alone, it turns out that there's been a 400% increase in UK employees which are working remotely or working from home. And it's now more than ever that businesses are looking at technology that they can invest in to essentially lessen the impact that their business may suffer if we encounter situations like we've seen in the past 6 months as we go forward. And many firms were forced into the current situation, and they were forced to use sticking plasters and temporary solutions like that one that I just shared with the courier. However, with all this uncertainty for the future, which we kind of know now we're going to have, it's going to be a long-term thing. Businesses are looking at forming long-term partnerships with tech companies which can consult and advise and provide services and technology which is going to enable that business to stay afloat or even thrive in the future economy. And one really interesting stat here, which I pulled out, really don't want to overload you guys with stats. This is about us taking value from this here, and we will send this presentation over for your own review. But the ONS forecasts that by 2022, the increase in the past 3 years will be 77% in people working remotely, which I think is absolutely huge. And this was actually released prior to COVID-19. So we can only imagine what that figure is going to be with a re-review. Now, if we think specifically about remote working for a finance team, so for most companies, finance teams were one of the first to begin working remotely. And I think for those of you that have been in the position as a finance leader, a finance person, any part of the finance team, it's one thing to work remotely, and it's a vastly different thing to be able to work remotely with the right tools. And, I think sort of thrown into the situation, businesses that didn't have those tools very quickly could spotlight themselves. And with all the finance people, finance teams I've met, there's generally a running trait across all of them in that they want to be productive, they want to know their place within the team, and they want to know what their impact is towards that business. And I think, we all desire to be as productive as we can. We all desire to have that mobility. I mean, wouldn't it be great to be able to approve invoices on the go via mobile, or approve expenses on the go, or let alone make your own expense report via an expense mobile app? And we want to think we have that visibility, that control, that security. We've communicated the expense policy well enough. Unfortunately, the vast majority of businesses still manage their supplier invoicing process and their expense processes very manually. So that normally involves spreadsheets and paper. That means stapling chronologically all the receipts that you've gathered for that period, be it per week, per month, per quarter. It's a really slow process, and for anyone that has to do manual expense reports, I'm absolutely sure that you'd agree with me. But with that as well, with a manual process, you're not going to have that data and that sort of insight that technology can grant you to look around the corner. And we've already talked about how uncertain the future is, and we know it's going to be uncertain. We don't exactly know what's around the corner, but imagine the damage of lack of insight. I mean, how can you make strategic decisions across your organization if you don't have the data that you need to make those calls and to actually have those war rooms in the first place? That leads me on to the discussion of, what is that manual process really costing you? And when I speak with a business for the first time, the first question that I'll ask them is, what is the challenge and how much is that challenge costing you? Because we need to put a price tag on that challenge before we can, really look at solving it. And to put some numbers behind the sort of challenges and the pains that we're seeing, we conducted some research with AMI partners, which revealed 3 key areas which finance leaders have revealed as major cost sinks. So the first of those is money and time. And, really it speaks for itself. Money is time, time is money. And when I'm speaking with a business about their goals, I mean, they'll usually say something to me like, Sean, we're looking to expand into more international markets within the next 5 years. We're looking to increase revenue by 400%. We're looking to create a more compelling offer for our employees, which, again, costs money and takes time. And that's the one resounding answer, which I pretty much hear in every instance, is time. Sean, I wish we had another month. I wish we had a Q5. We really hear it all the time. And if you pause to think about if we just hone into one part of that manual process and we think about expense reports, let's imagine that you have a sales team and they're out and about meeting customers, existing and new, and they're incurring expenses on the business. So on average, the average sales consultant will take between 2 to 3 hours to complete their expense report. So if we base this off 2 hours, let's say you've got 10 people within your sales team, that's going to be 20 hours per month that the team are actually spending building their expense report. And there's huge cost and time savings with the system, but say, for example, if we could cut that in half by 50%, straight away there's 10 hours back into your business, which can go on profit generating activities for that sales team. And then if we zoom out of the microscope and we think about the other touch points of expenses, when we think about, who do we submit that expense report to? Is it our department head, the budget holder, business leaders? They have to then sift through the expense report. They have to make sure that everything is within policy. They have to make sure they're happy with the level of spend that they're seeing. Once they've worked out exactly what they're happy to approve, anything they need to send back to the claimant, this then needs to be finalized, sent to finance then. And for anyone that's on this webinar that works in finance, I know that even if you have salespeople which are spending 5 hours per month on their expense reports, they still come through incomplete, and there's loads of work to be done with them. Whether that's that something's coded incorrectly, whether we haven't actually, say we're a professional services business and we recharge those expenses, have we indicated how much we need to recharge that organization for that? And those businesses that don't leverage technology here are really missing out on technology, which likely their competitors are using. So, as soon as someone says to me, I wish we had a Q5, then that's exactly what I'm looking to deliver with our technology. It's calculating the time that we can put back into that business. And in terms of the sorts of return investments that we can deliver, SAP Concur have value engineers that can work with you to essentially give you a really good indication of what the likely savings would be in deploying our software. And that does turn out to be quite accurate in most instances. So the second element is visibility. So many businesses struggle to see this spend clearly, and especially in these times, not having an accurate view on your cash flow is setting you up for a really bumpy ride on what's to come. And it could be that you're suffering with excess duplicate data, missing data, or simply data that you can't trust because you don't really know where it's come from. And how can you possibly plan strategically to weather the storm of COVID-19 and 2021 and ongoing now if you have an incomplete understanding of where your business financial situation actually is? And there's quite an interesting story that I can tell here. So one of our colleagues that's actually working for SAP Concur now, she was a finance director over in the US for a group of hospitals. And what's really important with a hospital chain is obviously their supplies. So as they use up medicines and supplies, the procurement teams put in orders to restock these, and usually delivery would happen the next day. They had a good team. They worked hard. They knew what they had to do, and there's no real reason to change, right? But as that FT discovered, wrong. So being an FD of a group of hospitals pretty much means that you're on emergency financial call out 24 hours a day. And that's what happened. So this lady received a call in the middle of the night, and she was told that one of their key suppliers had put them on credit hold and was pausing all forthcoming deliveries. So she's thinking, well, what on earth has happened here? So she checked in with the team, spoke to the finance manager, and it turned out there'd been some sickness, there'd been some absence across the team, and with that, the people that should be responsible for paying those supplier invoices, they'd become lost, they'd been buried, and they'd been completely missed. So there was now a lot of money owed to that supplier. They had absolutely no idea that this was coming up, and this was completely unbudgeted capital that FD then had to pay out, which when we're thinking of a big group of hospitals, you can imagine all the kind of senior team that's going to then upset, and how that affects budgeting going forward in their year. So thankfully they did overcome that. They paid the supplier. There was some disruption, but speaking with her, it was somewhat overcome. And the next thing that they did was they invested in technology to make sure that they could see that spend clearly. So in future, when their invoices come into their business, they can see them from a dashboard. They can see a simple dashboard that tells them how much is outstanding for payment, how much has been sent for payment, and how much has been processed historically. Which is a really amazing change, and strangely enough, that FD is working for our US team now at Concur. Which leads me on to risk and compliance. So, again, some interesting stats here on what we heard from leaders on the back of the AMI research that we conducted. But this, again, I like to tell stories and try and make this relatable to everyone that's on the webinar here today. So if we think about expense claims, for UK expenses, that's fine. I mean, we can read the receipts, and I'm sure that you can see what's on that receipt, and you can compare that to your policy as for whether that's compliant. Now, what if one of your reps, one of the team were traveling over to Germany, Spain, or even China? Those receipts are now going to be in a different language. So does your team speak multilingually? I mean, would you have support for German, Spanish, and Chinese receipts? And, in almost every case, that's no. Obviously not. We don't have a multilingual finance team. But how do you authorize that spend? How do you know that Chinese receipt was for food when it could be for anything? So we don't read the language. And that's exactly what we found with one of our clients. So we had a client that used to pay pretty much every receipt which came in from overseas. They weren't a client previously, but then they rolled out SAP Concur. And with the help of our audit team, which are all employees of SAP, they essentially verify all the receipts that go through the system. And that, of course, does mean that you have multilingual support. And what they discovered, that client, is that they had a chap which was based in China, and he was traveling to South Korea on business fairly frequently. And those receipts that were coming through that were being authorized, they weren't for food, they weren't for entertaining clients, but they were actually for fine art purchases, which he was lining his walls with in his home. That business had been paying out those expenses for about 6 or 7 months before they actually realized what was going on, and they put a stop to it. And obviously that person was dealt with. But it's something that they wouldn't have picked up without our system. So we've got another quick poll here. I'm just going to shoot this up on the screen for you. And this time we're looking at the challenges that you're facing now within your finance team. So if you can, please, let me know any and all of the problems and challenges that you guys are facing within your teams at the minute. It'd be really good to hear, if any of these points that we've talked through here are resonating with anyone. Brilliant. So I would say that the vast majority of people are saying that it's a time-consuming process, which absolutely any manual task is. With these manual tasks as well, we need to think, is there any way that we can we can limit them? Is there any way that we can remove those from the business to essentially enable us to be a bit more effective? We're seeing limited analysis and KPI reporting as the second most popular result, and the third most popular actually being log cycle or approval times. So how long it's taking those invoices, those expense reports to get through the system, get approved, and get processed for reimbursement. That's, again, probably what I'd expect. I think time consumption is normally people's biggest headache when we talk about this topic here. Cool. So speaking with the businesses that we speak with every day at SAP Concur, I mean, it's clear that COVID-19 has been a huge catalyst for businesses to change and to certainly reassess their finance processes. Businesses are looking to ensure that systems are future fit and robust for any situation. And indeed, many are considering what the future may look like, whether they're ready or if they're not ready. So data here has been gathered again from that research paper with AMI partners, and we will be sharing all the source data here at the end of the presentation, so you can review that for yourself as well. So first of all, one way that you can start to make good strides towards improving the way that your business can work remotely is, of course, supporting those that work at home. I really can't tell you how helpful it is to be able to do my own expense reports and approve my own invoices without any major disruption at all. I've worked within this line of tech now for 5 years as well, so it's 5 years since I have built a manual expense report. So I can really speak for myself in terms of the time it saves me as an employee as well. It's just a really nice tool to have when you're out and about, when you are traveling, to be able to take a picture of that receipt and not have to store it in your wallet all month until you're ready to make that expense report, at which point you discover that you've lost 3 or 4 receipts, is a really, really good thing to have. And no doubt for our finance team as well, that are processing our expenses. And automation has a really dramatic impact on time and financial challenges as well. And there's a really nice quote here from Luke Braham from Red, that's one of our customers. And he said that managers can now do expenses on the go rather than handing receipts to their PA. We're getting rid of those. We're not getting rid of those old people. We're not getting rid of those people, but they're now freed up to do things which are more important. And if you think about that, finance courses are hard. I'm sure that a lot of you on this webinar have done those finance courses too, and you can attest to that. They're hard. You have to study for them. It doesn't come for free. You're intelligent people, and to come into a business and to be expected to use your intellect, your brain power, your creativity, and all that value that you want to bring to the organization, and to put that into simply looking at invoice A and keying the data in, invoice B, keying the data in, is quite simply brain numbing. One of the top concerns across finance people as well, finance leaders, is their turnover within their teams. And critical feedback is often that the role wasn't challenging enough. That individual didn't feel like they were contributing enough to that organization to want to stay. So they've looked elsewhere. And that's the hard hitting fact of the modern workplace and what people expect from an employer. And when I speak with finance teams, I tell them that you are a profit center of your organization. And they're normally first to say, well, actually, no, that's sales and marketing's job. You're completely wrong, because finance, if we think about a business as an engine, absolutely, the sales and the marketing teams, they're putting the fuel in the engine. So they're driving in the new customers, the new leads, whatever it is that you need to grow as an organization. It's great to put things into an engine, but you're always going to have exhaust emissions. And it's down to that finance team to work out how they can optimize everything that's coming into the business, how they can reduce the emissions which are going out, i.e. put money more onto their bottom line, and essentially increase their miles per gallon across their processes. And when I say that, normally they turn around and they say, actually, yeah, you're kind of right. That is what we should do. But actually, we are processing simple data. So it comes back to free your people up, let them work on more strategic tasks, and let them grow your bottom line. Let them do what they're here to do. Let them do what they've studied to do and what they want to do, which is going to keep them happy. It's going to get them promoted, and it's going to grow your organization overnight. Visibility. So this is an interesting quote here again from another customer. So Michael Tinney, finance manager of FBD Insurance over in Ireland. We can now easily produce a report of expenditure out of Concur's expense reporting tool to give us access to the information we need. So with the second most popular answer on that poll being visibility and KPI reporting data, this is exactly what Michael's saying here. And he went on to say that a lot of our expenses are for CPD, or continuing professional development, and it's paid directly by staff and it's reclaimed on their expenses. And rather than going through accounts payable processes, the learning and development section were not able to get a comprehensive picture of the training expenditures. And now using SAP Concur, they can produce a report of training expenditure out of Concur's reporting tool on an automated basis to give them the information that they need exactly when they need it. Thirdly, risk and compliance. So interestingly, 68% of finance leaders that were asked in that research paper weren't completely confident that their policies were being complied with. Probably one of the most entertaining parts of our role as consultants within an expenses organization like Concur is hearing the sorts of stories that we do from finance leaders. There's pretty much nothing that I've heard which has been expensed at some point within different organizations that I've spoken to. And it can be difficult to enforce on those employees as well. And quite often policies aren't actually kept up to date. Quite often they tell us what we can claim for, but they're not very clear on what we can't claim for. And again, policy is normally communicated through an employee handbook, right? So you would join the business, you'd have your induction material, you'd have an outline of what the job is, who your manager is, exactly what the hierarchy is at the business. Oh, and you'll get the expenses policy on the back page there as well. But don't worry, that book only goes straight into a drawer to gather dust, or top of the bookshelf where you'll never see it until you move house. So within technology-based systems like Concur, the benefit obviously is that as the claimant is making their expense claim, they can see exactly what the policy is. If for any reason they've breached the policy, and do bear in mind there can be valid reasons for breaching policy as well. There can be it can be justifiable reasons. They can see those straight away before they submit that to their manager. So if something is outside of policy, say for example they didn't get a receipt for their fuel because the receipt printer wasn't working, they have the ability of adding that as a comment against the line item. So all of that is integrated. The manager can then see the policy, they can see what the breach was, they can see the justification, and they can use their own diligence as for whether they want to authorize that expense or if they want to challenge the expense and go back. But all of that can be done on one platform with really simple push notifications and emails. So that's obviously the benefit there in terms of risk and compliance. Just some food for thought here. And this has come from that same research paper, which I will be sharing. But businesses that adopt invoice automation finance technology typically save over £30,000 per year after implementation. We've talked around some of the reasons for why that is today, but ultimately the most effective way to put that ticket price on what your problem is to get in touch, speak with us. We've got solutions consultants which will happily provide you a free consultation and take you through a thorough return on investment of what you can expect from Concur. What's the value projection within 12, 24 months? What can I expect to see? Let's tell you that. And in terms of the Concur platform, so by deploying a single, easy-to-use integrated platform for managing spend, incorporating time-saving functionality like optical character recognition to eliminate the rekeying, automated online approval workflows that are fully auditable, comprehensive analysis reports into spending data, which can get you the truth sooner and show you exactly what spend you have coming around the corner, as well as built-in policy controls to reduce the risk and ensure internal and external compliance is adhered to, you can start to realize the benefits that we've spoken about. When you can manage this, you can achieve greater data visibility, greater adhesion to policy, and actually, there should be a very good change response from the end users. I mean, No finance person that I've shown Concur to has gone, oh no, that looks like it's going to make my life so much harder. It's always the opposite. And, there may be some questions, or, people may be more curious for, how their time is going to be spent if they're not working on these tasks. And, when we think about managing that change and system deployments like Concur, I would urge you to be upfront with your employees if you are thinking about doing this. I mean, what do you want them to be working on? What's the next big strategic task that we can suddenly put an extra 10, 20, 30 hours a week into, which is going to grow the organization and make that engine more efficient? So, we're using the fuel that's coming in more efficiently to make it a more profitable engine, a more profitable business. And, in terms of, you're probably thinking, well, what can be our next steps? And your next steps might be quite different to another business's. But if I leave you with one takeaway from this, if you think, well, this was great, but I haven't taken a massive amount from it, then please do let me know. But if there's one thing you take from this, go away and look at your manual processes today. So what manual processes do you have? Are there solutions in the market that can remove them? How much time is that going to save you? And how happy are you going to be about that time saving? How much better is that going to make you feel? If you don't have a system in place, if you do have systems in place, I do speak to a lot of businesses that say, yeah, Sean, we've automated the invoices, we've got that covered. 10 minutes of conversation, I discovered that actually for anything that's non-PO, which tends to be the bigger headache, they don't have a process, and that part's really manual. Please do have a think about that. Stay curious, ask those questions, and please do feel free to reach out to me, reach out to my team, and speak with us. I mean, we're always happy. We're always open to provide a diagnosis on a business's technology stack. However you want to approach that project. We've got tons of experience here, and a platform which is deployed across 50,000 clients globally as well. So loads of customers that we can put you in touch with, speak with, which are probably really similar to your organization as well. So to that end, I'm going to include a couple of resources which will be in follow-up to this webinar here. So there's some online ROI tools that we have, so you can start to look at your own return on investment. It's good, but please, if you would like to look at some serious value projections and return on investment stuff, get in touch with us, because we'd like to take your actual data to actually base these return on investments off of, to give you a really accurate indication of what your likely savings would be across time and money. And please click the second link when you send over the presentation to see a quick demo overview. Again, we can provide a full demonstration. And again, point 3, do get in touch to get a consultation with us. So to that end, does anyone have any questions for us at all? And please feel free to put them in the chat box, and we can answer those for you hopefully here today. And thank you everyone for pointing out my reminders popped up. Apologies for that. I can see we've got a couple of questions here. So we have around 100 people at our company. Are we too small for this? Absolutely not. There's no business that's really too small for SAP Concur. To be completely honest, I think people see the SAP brand name, they kind of think about how big SAP is, and they assume it's an enterprise solution. Absolutely not. So I'm actually part of our SMB team here in the UK, and we work with businesses that might be processing as few as 10 expenses per month. Invoices, maybe 25 per month. There's still a benefit to automation. Obviously, that scales in factor as you grow and increase the volumes that are going through these systems. But absolutely, there is no business that's too small to make the most of technology which is available. I've got another one through here. What's your advice for teams that are reluctant to change? It's always going to be a bit of a difficult one. It's going to be a case-by-case scenario. When business leaders ask me about how we manage change for an organization, I'll normally ask a million questions, and then I'll end up saying, look, you need to educate your people. You need to provide them the reassurance that what we're doing is an investment in them. As much as we're buying technology, this is to free them up from these manual tasks so they can do what their degree entails, what those finance courses were actually about. They can add strategic value to that business. I think that education can be broader as well. Maybe show them kind of this presentation, show them anything which supports the fact that technology is going to be the way forward for a lot of business. It is going to pave the route to success for businesses now in 2020 and going forward. So education, reassurance would be my two biggest tips there. Well, thank you everybody for your time. I hope this webinar was helpful. If there's any other topics that you would like us to cover which you think would be interesting or useful to you or your organization, please do let us know as well. And you can find my contact details on the follow-up, which we'll send over for you as well. So thank you ever so much. I've been Sean Morgan from SAP Concur, and have a great rest of the day.